The Crusades were a series of religious wars during the Middle Ages that were initiated, supported, and sometimes ordered by the Latin Church. The best known of these was the one that sent armies to the Holy Land from 1095 to 1291 to liberate Jerusalem and its environs from Muslim rule. Simultaneous military campaigns in the Iberian Peninsula against the Moors, Reconquista, and in northern Europe against Slavic tribes, Northern Crusades, were also known as Crusades. Throughout the 15th century, there were other crusades sanctioned by the Church against heretical Christianity, against the Byzantine and Ottoman empires, against paganism and heretical groups, and for political reasons. Civilly motivated crusades were frequent, but not sanctioned by the Church. Since the First Crusade, which resulted in the recapture of Jerusalem by Christians in 1099, dozens have occurred, forming a focal point in European history for hundreds of years. The Crusades began with the proclamation of the First Crusade by Pope Urban II at the Council of Clermont in 1095, urging military support for Byzantine Emperor Alexios I to defeat the Seljuk Empire and calling for an armed pilgrimage to Jerusalem. The crusade was met with enthusiasm from all social classes in Western Europe. The motivations for the First Crusades were diverse, including the need for religious salvation, the fulfillment of feudal obligations, the opportunity for prestige, and economic and political gain. Later crusades were often led by organized armies, sometimes led by kings, and always with the blessing of the Pope. The early successes led to the formation of four Crusader states: the County of Edessa, the Principality of Antioch, the Kingdom of Jerusalem, and the County of Tripoli. The Crusader presence in the region continued in some form until the fall of Acre in 1291, after which no crusades to reclaim the Holy Land were carried out. The struggle between Christians and Muslims in the Iberian Peninsula, which was declared a crusade in 1123, is known to Christians as the Reconquista. It ended in 1492 with the collapse of the Muslim Emirate of Granada, and from 1147 onwards there were campaigns in northern Europe against pagan tribes, which were also considered crusades. In 1199 Pope Innocent III initiated a political crusade against pagan Christians. In the 13th century, the Crusades were used against the Catholics of Languedoc and against the Bosnian state. This practice continued against the Waldensians in Savoy and the Hussites in Bohemia in the 15th century and against the Protestants in the 16th century. From the mid-14th century onwards, the rhetoric of Crusades was used in response to the rise of the Ottoman Empire, culminating in the Holy League in 1699. In modern historiography, the term crusade was originally applied to the 11th, 12th, and 13th century European Christian militias that traveled to the Holy Land. It later came to include campaigns led, supported, and sometimes directed by Roman Catholics against heretics or other alleged religious targets. These were distinct from other Christian wars in which penance was considered and in which participants were forgiven of all confessed sins. The use of the term can give the impression of a misunderstanding of the connection, particularly with regard to the First Crusade, and its definition is a significant historiographical issue that has been debated by contemporary historians. In the First Crusade, iter, journey, and peregrinatio, pilgrimage, were used in the campaign. Crusader terminology remained inseparable from Christian pilgrimage into the 12th century. By the end of the century, the specific language of Crusades had come into use in the form of crucis ignatus. One sign is the cross, for the Crusaders, leading to the French croisade, way of the cross. By the mid-13th century, the cross had become the main signifier of Crusades, with crux transmarina, cross beyond the sea, used for Crusades in the eastern Mediterranean, and crux cismarina, cross beside the sea, for Crusades in Europe. In modern English, the term crusade dates back to the early 1700s. The Arabic word for a battle or contest, especially for the spread of Islam, was used for the religious wars of Muslims against infidels. and some Muslims believe it was a duty based on the Quran and Hadith. Frankish and Latin were spoken by peoples of the Near East during the Crusades for the Western Europeans who had broken away from the Byzantine Christians, who were known as Greeks. Saracen was a term for Arab Muslims, from the Greek and Roman names for the nomadic tribes of the Syrian Arabic desert. Crusader sources used the term Syrians to describe Arabic-speaking Christians who were members of the Greek Orthodox Church, and Jacobites for those who were members of the Syrian Orthodox Church. The crusading state of Syria and Palestine was known as Outremer, from the French Outre-mer, or overseas territories. Many crusades took place, but the most important occurred between the 11th and 13th centuries, when 9 major crusades were fought. This great war and many minor wars occurred during this time. Some of the wars were fought within Europe itself, such as in Spain. There were minor wars throughout the 16th century, up until the Renaissance and the Reformation. Saladin agreed to these terms, but the treaty was no longer valid because the Christian monks would not allow the Christians to marry their daughters, sisters, or other women to Muslims whom they considered infidels. The monks gathered to excommunicate Richard and made him an infidel, and threatened his sister in various ways. King Richard then met with Saladin again and asked him to convert from Islam to Christianity, but Saladin refused. In the meantime, King Richard was annoyed by the intervention of the Marquis of Montferrat, so he hired the natives to assassinate him. When things got to this point, King Richard was discouraged and wanted to bring his army home because he could not capture Jerusalem. He offered Saladin terms of peace, but he did not agree to some of the terms because some of the cities mentioned were very important for the defense of the empire and could not be let go. However, the efforts of these two warriors continued. Finally, on September 2, 1192, 22 Shaban, 588 AH, the two sides made a permanent peace treaty and King Richard marched his army back home. He marched through Eastern Europe in disguise, but was captured and imprisoned by the Christians. The English had to send a large sum of money to ransom him. The Third Crusade ended there, with the loss of hundreds of thousands of lives, millions of people left homeless, and cities destroyed. Saladin then led a small army to inspect the coastal towns and repair various places, and returned to Damascus with his family, where he died on March 4, 1193, 27 Safar, 589 AH, at the age of 55.